Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Thanks for joining me for today's conversation with travel writer Harriet Baskas. I go into a list of Harriet's accomplishments at the beginning of our conversation, but in short, know that Harriet is a successful travel writer who has consistently written for a number of publications, and that's both on and offline, for many years. In addition to writing more traditional travel stories, she's carved out a niche for herself in an area of interest that one might call, well, I guess it's a little bit quirky, and you'll hear more about that. In her quiet, unassuming way, she's held steadfast in her career by following what she loves. She calls it following her bliss. As I think about the conversations I've had with women for this podcast, there's definitely a recurring theme. These women are bucking trends. Whether what they do is unusual for a woman or it's an unusual path, period, what they're doing is following their heart. And Harriet is no different. In this conversation, which was recorded late last year, we spoke about many things, including why she doesn't think getting into travel writing is a good career path for people right now, what a typical day is like for her as a travel writer and book author, and what the most bold thing is that she's done. You'll also hear us reference Debbie Reynolds, as she had just passed away when we recorded this. Harriet and I met probably, 8 or so years ago in Seattle at a travel event, and I've gotten to know her pretty well in that time, and a few things stand out to me about Harriet. She is endlessly curious. She's used to being the one asking questions, so I really appreciated her being in the passenger seat this time around. But whenever I see her, whether it's one-on-one or in a group situation, she has so many questions and is so interested in other people and things around her. I love that about Harriet. And I've really tried to adopt some of that curiosity in my own life. It means listening more and paying close attention to details, something that in our ever-increasing world of distraction has become more difficult, but I really believe that it's also more important. I hope you'll leave this conversation thinking about how you might be more curious about the world around you, and especially think of Harriet next time you're stuck at the airport. My conversation with Harriet will start in just a moment, but before that, I wanted to invite you to check out our Trips on the Wander Tours site, where we feature women-only tours to a number of destinations, including India, Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea. Those are actually co-ed trips, and Ireland. I'm even working on future trips to South Africa and South America. For those who would like something in the U.S., we've got culinary tours to Santa Fe, New Orleans, and Seattle. You can find all of those on wandertours.com. That's WANDER tours.com. I'd also like to ask you to please leave a review of this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. Whether you love it, you hate it, or you have some constructive criticism, please let me know. I do really value your opinion, and I'll be straight up that the more reviews and subscribers the podcast has, the more likely we'll get noticed. And really, bottom line is my goal is to build our Be Bold community around the world. So this is one way you can help us do that, building that community. So with that, enjoy this conversation with travel writer Harriet Baskas. So my guest today is Harriet Baskas. Harriet is the author of a number of books, including Hidden Treasures, What Museums Can't or Won't Show You, Washington Icons, 50 Classic Views of the Evergreen State, Washington Curiosities, and also Oregon Curiosities, and their subtitles are Quirky Characters, Roadside Oddities, and Other Offbeat Stuff. Harriet also has a monthly column at USA Today called At the Airport. She writes for NBC.com, CNBC. She has her own blog at Stuck at the Airport, and she just in general knows a heck of a lot about airports and air travel. So welcome, Harriet.
Thank you very much.
So before we start, I want to tell you something kind of funny. I probably had heard of you, knew of you many years ago. We've probably known each other maybe 8 years or so here in Seattle. I knew of you long before that. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I probably read your column in USA Today. And when I found out that you lived in Seattle, I thought, oh, Harriet Baskas is in Seattle. Maybe I'll meet her one day. So that was a lot of fun.
So here we are.
So
yes.
here we are. I know how many years later. So yeah, so it's just great. So I had a crush on you and a fan crush on you many years ago. And I appreciate your accomplishments as a travel writer. And want to kind of dig in today and find out a little bit more about how you got there, where your interests have kind of grown from over all these years, and just dig into some of the details with that.
Great.
So is that good with you?
Sounds great.
Okay, super. So one of the things that I do find really fascinating, and as a person who moved to Seattle many years ago, 26 years ago, thinking that I would get into the travel writing business, I know that it's difficult. It is not an easy way of life. It's hard to find gigs, and that was in the time when there were a lot of travel magazines and newspapers had travel columns and thick sections filled with travel stories. How did you do it?
Well, I think maybe I backed into it. So when I first came out west, I came to work at a community radio station, and I had never been out west. And so the first thing I needed to do was to go find the ocean. We moved from Massachusetts to Portland, Oregon. Where's the ocean? So we drove wester, and stopped at a Pioneer Museum in Tillamook. Inside, I didn't know what a Pioneer Museum was, because we don't have pioneers back east. And inside was like every single thing they had ever had in that town, including things that had come across the Oregon Trail, something you read about when you're a kid back east. And I got caught up in, I need to learn about my new place by visiting all the places in my new place. And so I started doing radio stories, because I was a radio producer, and traveling around the Northwest and then traveling around the rest of the country to do radio stories about weird museums. So in doing stories about weird museums for radio, I ended up doing stories about airports, and then the internet started.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to be, and then the internet started, and it was a perfect match to go from making radio stories to doing reports about airports on the internet.
So when you were doing the radio stories, museums are visual. So how did you do a radio story about a visual medium?
Well, I was lucky because they were weird museums that I was after. And so as much it was the people who were running the museums who were quirky and the things that they had. So the Nut Museum or the Banana Museum or the Tooth Fairy Museum.
What? Where are these?
The Nut Museum was in Connecticut. The Banana Museum was in California.
Do they still exist?
I think the Banana Museum got sold to someone. The Nut Museum doesn't exist anymore. The Tooth Fairy Museum might still be outside of Chicago. But I was after finding out about the world through that. That was my kind of the little area I focused on. And if someone said to me, "Are you a travel reporter?" I would say, "No, I'm a radio producer and I'm a reporter. I'm reporting about this weird stuff, but that's what I'm reporting about." And then someone called me up when I came to Seattle and said, "Have you ever thought of writing a book?" And I said, "No, I'm a radio producer," not thinking that you write what you say on the radio, like we are here, so a little bit. And then I started writing books, and then the internet gave me another outlet. So writing books, being on the web, giving presentations, all of that is what now is part of my world.
When you went into a museum, you would not only look at the bananas, but you would talk to the curators or the directors, and these were the characters.
These were, definitely the stories.
Who was funding these museums?
So because it was community radio or public radio, often I would get small grants from the National Endowment for the Arts or sell them to National Public Radio.
These were the stories that would show up at 10 minutes before the hour.
Yes.
It's kind of the fun ones, yeah.
They're still there. Some of them are still there.
Do they play them, you mean?
No, but they're archived.
They're archived. Yeah. Okay. Have you ever been to the archives and listened to your...
No, they're online now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So today Debbie Reynolds just died, and I had done an interview with her Hollywood Costume Museum, and I was looking for it. I'm not sure it's still up there.
Oh, well, maybe you'll hear it on NPR. What was that like? What meeting Debbie Reynolds?
She was great. She's, I think, exactly like you kind of see her on any interview, incredibly perky and sweet. And she had this Hollywood costume collection that she was in love with.
And that was in Vegas.
That was in Vegas, yeah. Well, yeah.
Where all the good costume collections are. You had this, did you bring this curiosity with you when you moved from the East Coast? Or did you plop into your destination and say, I want to learn about this? Like, where does that curiosity come from?
I think I'm just curious, nosy. I mean, I was already in radio, doing radio stories and making radio. So kind of, I found like, I don't know if you call it a bliss or something that connected this curiosity with this weird passion to find out about a place through the weird things that were there.
Have you come across anyone else doing something similar to you, or did you just kind of forge your own path?
I think there's other people who do it in different ways. I mean, every weird person has their own weirdness for it. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to public radio or community radio, you'll hear offbeat stories. Now there's lots of books about weird things or weird collections. So yeah.
I can't imagine that there were too many mentors out there for you.
No. And that was good.
Yeah. Well, that takes a certain kind of boldness in itself, just to think that you can come up with this idea and you can make a career out of it.
Yeah.
Because most people don't do that.
That's right. And a lot of people said, just don't talk about it. Don't be that weird. Find a real job.
And then do that on the side?
Yeah.
Is that what you did?
Well, yes, because I was also the manager. If you know how to write a grant, in a small organization, you'll get moved up the management ladder. So then I became community radio manager. So I built a station. I brought some stations back from the brink. And so I was doing both.
Got it. So within a given station, you were wearing a couple of different hats. You knew how to get a grant. You could pitch this kind of quirky thing, but then you'd put on your manager hat and you would go actually run the station or...
Right. So for a long time, I had a little studio in my house. So I would be the manager of the station during the day and then go home and be a radio producer.
Well, you've got a nice space here. You can do the same thing.
Yes, except now you don't need a whole room to have a radio studio.
No, you don't. You could, the size of a bathroom.
Yes.
You can produce it all, basically. Just going back a little bit in time, you're a travel writer, but you also do these kind of quirky, offbeat things. Do you consider yourself more travel, like 80% travel writer, or is your heart really in the quirky things?
I think I tell people I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, and I just have certain things that I like to report on if I can. So unusual places, airports came out of looking for unusual places.
When you were a kid, what I'm getting around to, I'm trying to find out the origin of that. When you were a kid, did your family take you around and show you quirky places?
No.
They didn't take you to airports and hang out for hours?
No. The only thing I can think that might relate to it is my father was a tinkerer, and often he would take us to the Lower East Side of New York to this place that had like walls full of little, metal pieces he needed for his projects, and we would just be there. And I don't know if that's a familiar feeling to be in a place full of weird things, but no, we never went to museums as a little kid.
Was it a hobby shop, or was it a?
It was like a hardware store for
55-year-old men.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My dad went to those too.
Boxes of metal things you might need for something.
And Slim Jims at the counter. And gumball machines for the kids to keep them busy. Okay. So you were just kind of poking around and following along with it. Now, one of the things that, so you have a blog that's stuck at the airport, and you had a book that was out a while back as well with that same name. I have tried to adopt the Harriet Baskas method of staying in an airport, because I think I've had, sometimes when I go to Asia, I have very long layovers. I think in Seoul, I sometimes have 10-hour layovers coming back. And if I don't get bumped up and go in the lounge for that time period and eat and drink for free and watch CNN to catch up on the world, I'll just poke around the airport with you in mind,
Okay.
thinking, what would Harriet look for? Like, I know, like, you've got your, I don't know if you still do it, kind of your souvenir Sunday under $10 gifts and that sort of thing. I want to pull my hair out after about 10 minutes because I don't know, I get bored. How is it that you're not bored? What do you look for? What do you find in an airport that keeps you fascinated and curious?
Well, I think part of what appeals to me about airports is that they're the crossroads, the modern day crossroads. As a kid, I used to like going to Grand Central Station and watching all the people. Where were they going? What was their story? You can just sit in an airport and watch the stories go by and think about the stories go by. Where is that person coming from? What's that story? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they going to meet someone? And most every airport these days, if you look around, you'll find an exhibit of something, a plaque that talks about the history of that space or that place.
Mm-hmm.
Even though so many airports, especially some of the big international ones, the stores are the stores you'll see every place. I mean, how many
Coach
how
bags
many Coach
and
bags
right.
what does anyone want?
Right.
But there'll be some places that do have local items that you
Like
could
Singapore.
Look at. Like Singapore.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's like, I would live in that airport.
You could.
Yes. But I think of them more as just places that will have a surprise if you just keep looking.
What's the longest time you've spent in an airport?
Well, before I moved to Seattle, I slept overnight in the Seattle airport before there. And I remember the artwork I slept under. So maybe 15 hours.
Okay.
I mean, I have intentionally gone to airports that have hotels and stayed there for a weekend.
Oh, okay.
My 20th wedding anniversary was at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport Grand Hyatt. I mean, now as an adult, you have to. The Grand Hyatt. The 25th was at the Fairmont in Vancouver.
Oh, wow.
And the 30th was at the brand new Denver.
At the airport?
Yeah, at the airport.
Oh, fun.
Because they're nice places.
Yeah. And what about not overnighting or sleeping in the airport, but just being curious and wandering around? Like, if you have a 4-hour layover, do you just walk around?
I try to walk one because healthy is
Yeah.
part of traveling now. So you want to get your steps and just keep moving, which is another reason to travel light. I don't check bags, but I also don't take a lot with me. I've started not leaving enough room to get stuff that when I'm traveling, but I'm working on that. But yeah, I just keep walking. Most people want to find their gate, get situated, but so you find it and then you go and you come back later.
Are you a slow walker or do you power?
No, I'm a fast walker. Yeah.
So this brings on a whole new meaning for me at the next airport,
Yes.
because I think I have to wander around and look at everything, but you're saying it's okay to just kind of swish through.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
nothing
because you're
wrong
going to
with
come
that.
back. If you go out to the end, you could come back slower on your way back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because you might have missed the plaque on the way there.
Yes.
Okay, good tips.
And now soon, there will be services that will bring you a meal wherever you are in the airport. You'll be able to use an app and say, I'm over by gate 12, or I'm over here at this nice window, and they will bring you
Does
a
that
drink.
exist now?
Almost, but not.
It's in development. Can you say the name of the company?
No, because I don't think it works yet.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's places where you can use your app and order ahead.
Right.
It's called Grab. And there's, I think HMS Host has little carts that they're driving around the airport bringing people things. But I'm waiting for the one where you find a good spot and they'll come to you.
I had no idea.
Doesn't that make sense?
It makes total sense. It's got to be I don't know about a nightmare, but I just know how hard it is to set up a business in an airport.
But it's the same businesses that are there. They'll just have somebody bring you your
Okay.
stuff.
That's brilliant. Oh, good. I can't wait to sit my butt
Yes.
down.
I know, because some
and then
places,
not walk.
in some places, if you find a seat, you want to keep it. You don't want to go up and stand up and go get it.
Or if you
Right.
have luggage,
Yeah.
you don't want to have to carry it around. Good tip. I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
It's perfect. Right now, you are. What's a typical day for you?
So a typical day is I get up. I try to put something on my blog before 6 a.m. when it goes out to my subscribers.
Yeah. Now, do you do that? Do you have that prepared in advance, or because I get it?
I
and
want to
it's-
say yes, but sometimes I don't.
because it comes at like 6 a.m. or something. So you
Yes.
get up early and you make sure that it's heading out.
Yes. I think I should do it at night. And sometimes I do it the night before, but sometimes I do it in the morning. So it's actually good to know that there's a reason to get up early and focus and write something. And often it's just a piece from a story that I've written for one of my outlets.
So you pull a little bit of information from that and repurpose it.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're up early.
So
you
I'm
get
up
your
early,
post out.
exercise, get a post out, look over.
What exercise do you do?
What exercise do? I do a little bit of weights, a little bit of sit-ups, a little bit of push-ups, a little bit of stretching.
Do you have that here in the building? Or do you do it in your
I do it
place?
in our house, and then there's a fitness center. So if my post is up, then I'll go do like the treadmill for a little bit. So I do that, and then I usually have a list of stories that I've promised to deliver to different outlets, and I start working on that. The nice thing about living on the West Coast is that you can send email the night before, and that people that you want to talk to in the morning can get back to you. So when I log on at 6:00 in the morning, people are coming to their office on the East Coast, and I can start talking to them.
But isn't that stressful? I find it stressful that I don't have a break, because I get people from the East Coast emailing me before I'm awake, or as I'm waking up and I feel compelled to check my email, or I have people in other countries in the East who are 12 hours ahead who have questions for me or have work for me. So when I get up in the morning, it's like, oh no, it's a flood. But that's good for you.
It's good for me. I'm the type of freelancer who, again, because I have multiple outlets, I have multiple projects going on at any one time. So it's reassuring to me if I wake up and there's messages from people already.
And then how many stories at any given time are you working on?
Usually three or four.
For different outlets?
Often for different outlets.
And then how long does a typical story take you to write?
I'm not a fast writer, and because I'm so curious, I spend a little more time researching something than I think I really need to sometimes, but I enjoy learning about the stuff. So I'll talk, if I talk to someone, I'll talk to them for half an hour or an hour. So it might take me 8 hours for a story, or sometimes several days to pull together the interviews that I want.
Do you typically sit down and write part of a story and then you come back to it the next day or later in the day? Or can you just whip through a story and be so focused that it's you sit down and you get it done and you feel pretty good about it and you're ready to send it?
Some stories are pegged to news and need to turn them around in an hour or two. So whether I think it's a great story, or I just know that I will finish that story in 2 hours because that editor needs it. And what makes me the reliable freelancer is I can deliver. Other stories, if I know they're due in a couple of days, I'll work on them. I'll write it and then rewrite it or try to review it.
Are you doing something on Debbie Reynolds?
No, I just wrote my memory of meeting her.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, because I'm not an entertainment reporter right now. But talk about someone who was bold. There is probably a woman who had many stories.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I just saw Wishful Drinking. I just watched that last night and then turned it off and then saw the news that Debbie Reynolds had died too. So tragic. But so typical day continuing. You've done your stories. You have an office outside of your home,
right?
And you find you focus better that way?
I find that it makes me get dressed and leave the house.
Okay. Otherwise, would you be...
I would be one of those people who would
in
just
your pajamas
sit at my desk all day, and then someone would have to tell me it's time for dinner.
Okay.
But no, it's good to have a space. Even though I work at home, it's good to have a space that's officially my office, and I know that there's a rent due, so I feel professional somehow.
Yeah. And obligated. It's like going.
Yeah.
It's like paying for a gym membership.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I use it every day. Is that the question?
Yeah, then no, that's fine. That's fine because you leave.
So I leave the office.
Leave.
Yeah. And because I travel a lot, like you, I mean, there's weeks when I'm not there a lot, and I find that I miss it.
Mm-hmm.
I miss that, like anything that's a habit, sitting down, setting up to do your work, to do whatever it is you're going to do. There's that habit of going there. So yeah, I like it.
Do you take vacations?
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing I suspect with other people who write about travel. What other people do for vacation, we do to try to earn a living from it, right, and have the experience. So I'm not a very good traveler. relaxer traveler.
Do you miss that, or wish maybe you never had it, so you don't know what to miss, but do you sometimes wish that you were just on a vacation?
No, because I always want to tell people about the cool things I see.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm like one of those, if I wasn't writing about some things for a national audience, I'd be calling you up saying, Beth, you need to know about this. Or I'd be one of those people on Facebook all the time.
So you don't want to just go down to the Oregon coast and just go hunker down in a cabin for
I can't do that.
3 days.
I need to find new things,
And then you
open
need to
doors.
Right, and then you need to tell everybody about it too. You as I mentioned earlier, you have been able to make it a career, which is difficult. Would you agree?
Yes.
That it is?
Yes. I wasn't sure I could do it. There was a point where I was the manager of a radio station and a freelancer, and I was not very confident I could cut that link. And
You mean cut the link and then be a travel
the manager
writer?
and just be a freelancer.
Oh, I see.
I think anyone who's just going to be a freelancer of any sort, that's a big decision. And so I lined up projects and thought I would gave myself a year or two to try it. Yeah. But I am very fortunate because I have multiple outlets, and I do speaking, I do books, I do, multiple things. I think just writing a column.
Yeah.
It's just hard. There's very few writers of any sort who can do it unless you're a big name. It's also learning how to live lightly. I think because I was a community radio person, the salary wasn't too big to begin with, I learned how to live lightly.
So not extravagant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is helpful for sure. And I think as travelers, as opposed to tourists, we often do live a little bit more lightly.
Yes.
I mean, if that's our passion, if that's what our addiction is, I think we kind of learn to do that and funnel that money into the travel aspect. Would you recommend someone today trying to get into this business?
No. I think I'm old enough that I've been able to live in cities lightly, and I don't think in many cities you can do that anymore with cheap rent or whatever. I think my competition as a travel writer or bloggers who want to do it for free so they can get a free trip. And so there's a difference between a journalist and a blogger and someone who has 20 or 30 years of experience to draw on. So I think that's hard. I think it's hard to do. I know that there's different models where the lines are softer between the journalism and the blogging and the sponsors. So, and I know there's people who have learned how to do that. I haven't learned how to do that. So I think if you want to be a journalist, same, not newspapers, not magazines, and there's just fewer places to write for.
When you say you haven't learned how to do it, is it that you don't want to? Is it like you're happy where the business, the career, the lifestyle that you've created, that is more your path, and you're not interested in trying to blur it any further?
And maybe I'm making it harder for myself, but I call myself a journalist and not so much the business person, even though there's you have to have some business sense to have a career and have, that's an old-fashioned part of me. It's just trying to be more the journalist. So.
I don't think it's old-fashioned. I think it's one path. And I think that, I think just my observation, there was this big rush of travel bloggers, and there's still a lot of them out there. So I think that there was a big rush to travel blogging. I think that they're starting to fall off because they realize there isn't money in it. And these younger folks in particular are realizing that they want to make money and they want to have a home or a family, right, or an apartment or anything, any way to just kind of set down some roots, and you can't do that with the free travel. So I think that as I said, it's not an old-fashioned thing. I think it's just another path.
You're right.
And I think it's a path that's, I think on one hand, it's gaining more respect again. I think I think people are valuing it once again, but the problem is that those value propositions are disappearing because there's so many magazines and websites even that have disappeared, and it's just not available to many people. So yay for you for kind of hanging in there.
We're talking at the very end of the year, and there were a couple of years where the 1099s that I reported on my taxes, there were 15 different outlets that I had written for. And by the time I got those 1099s, half of those places didn't exist anymore.
Oh my gosh.
So it changes a lot. And so you have to be nimble and not scared, because it is scary. If it has nothing to, I had to learn that it has nothing to do with me. If a place goes out of business, if an outlet disappears or an editor leaves and I'm no longer, I don't go with that editor.
Right.
So
that was a
scary.
lesson that you had to learn? Was
Absolutely.
that hard in the beginning? Did you take it personally?
There were a couple of times I took it personally, because if you're a freelancer of any sort or you work out of your home, you're very isolated. So if someone doesn't need you anymore, what's the first thing you're going to think?
Right.
They don't need me anymore.
Right. Right.
Not that they don't need anybody, or they might have not be answering my phone call because they lost their job or their department got cut. So so you have to be nimble. You have to be.
So was it just experience that you, time after time after time, you started seeing a pattern like, oh, yeah, they're not calling me back because they don't have a job anymore. You just kind of learned that there was something behind it.
Yeah. And that's, I don't want to say I'm so old, but so many things have come and gone in terms of the web, in terms of outlets on the web, that I've seen things come and go very often. And even projects within a major outlet come
Yahoo
and go.
Travel.
Yeah. Or Bing or MSN or things like that. Whole things have come and gone, and that's why I like having multiple outlets and multiple things that I do, so that if one door closes, you kick down the other one and go from there.
Do you think that's a lesson that young people can learn, younger people? Or do you think it has to be experienced before the light bulb goes off and they go, oh, okay, yeah, I get what Harriet was saying about that?
Well, that's funny. Yes, but one thing I'm told about young people is that they move on to jobs very quickly these days, if there are jobs to move on to. But you just have to be, and I guess maybe that comes from experience or just necessity, just knowing that something else will come along. And being prepared for it, and going after networking, knowing what options are out there, knowing what having an expertise that you can sell. That's better than the travel blogger who just likes going places. I have an expertise and a deep Rolodex of contacts.
What's a
in my
Rolodex?
Field. I have a long list of contacts in my field.
Yeah.
And in my area of expertise that I can call on. And that takes a while. I think you probably get emails too from people saying, well, how do I do what you do? And you say, well, you take 30 years.
Right, exactly. Actually, what I say is come shadow me for a day and you'll be exhausted by 10 o'clock.
Yeah, because people think, oh, you travel and you get paid? How?
Right.
That's so easy.
So it's not a path that you would necessarily recommend to a young person. Is there advice that you could give to someone, not even necessarily a young person, but maybe somebody who's just thinking like, how can I make money at this? Or
well, I know it sounds like a cliche, but I think that thing of like figuring out, sitting very quiet sometimes and thinking about, if I didn't have to earn money, what would I do? And this is almost literally what I did one day. It's like, if I didn't have to earn money, what would I do? And my answer was, I would go to museums and find weird things. And then that's what I did. And so it's that thing of following your bliss, or just finding what it is that makes you really pleased in a day, is really true.
And then just figuring out how to make
that fit in the world.
How to make that a business, or like fit in the world. So this has been great. Where can people find you online? I know that you're an active Twitter person.
Yes.
I do know that because I'm not. And so I see your tweets come across and I think sometimes through Facebook or whatever, and I'm like, how does she keep up with that?
Stuck at the Airport is where I write every day. I did that blog for a year before I told anyone, just to see if I really cared.
That's a long commitment just to see if you care. A year.
I wasn't sure I would want to write every day without getting paid for it.
That's a huge commitment.
But I found that I wanted to tell people something about airports or air travel every day. And I didn't want anyone to tell me if I should or not say that, have that. So Stuck at the Airport. I also write on USA Today at the airport. I have a really lot of fun doing that every month. And then NBC, I write about also fun or serious travel issues.
And then on social media, what's your Twitter handle?
Baskas.
Baskas. Okay, great. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Super. And then just a couple of quick wrap-up questions. What would you say is the most bold thing that you've done in your life?
Oh, the most bold thing I did was sight unseen move from Portland, Oregon to Astoria, Oregon in the middle of winter to go build a community radio station, a community I had never lived in. I didn't know anyone.
From Portland
to Astoria to the coast of Oregon, which is pretty far. It's the northwest tip of Oregon. Very, very rainy, very dark.
Yeah. Cute. But small.
Yeah, cute but small. To build a radio station, to help a group build a radio station. I had never done a project like that. I was very young, and maybe that's why I said yes. I had never lived in a rural community. I lived in a house. I rented a house with a wood stove, and I had no idea how to build a fire. And I made that project, and I built that radio station.
And that was on your own. You did that.
I did it with the community, but I was hired as the
manager.
Well,
you moved on your own.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I drove out there in the middle of a rainstorm and thought, why did I do this? Yes, but it was when I think back on it, I did the project, I built an organization, we created a radio station that community loves still, and I had to figure out how to do it. And I think now, if I could do that, I could do anything.
And
when I get scared, I think of that.
When was that, and how long were you there?
I was there for almost 3 years, and it was 1983.
Wow.
I was very young. Yeah, it was very character building.
Do you have anything bold planned in the coming, let's say, year?
Yes.
Do tell.
Inspired by you and other people like you. I mean, I've written some books. I've written books that I truly wanted to, but I have another book that I've been talking about, and I'm determined to do it.
Tell us.
Well,
Can you?
All about really old food.
Old food.
Yes.
Tell us about old food.
So I'm part of my state's, Washington State's Humanities Commission sends a group of people out on the road to talk about different topics, and one of my new obsessions from visiting museums is really old food. There's lots of really 100, 200, 300-year-old bits of food in museum collections around the country, around the world. It has to do, the food itself, if it exists, the fact that it does exist is one thing, but they're associated with events or
weddings,
people's stories, weddings, happenstance, mistakes. And so I want to tell the stories of what those foods tell us about history and love and memory and things like that.
Fantastic.
Not about cooking.
Well, maybe you should add some recipes too.
Yes, I should.
Yeah, and then it'll be a runaway bestseller too.
Yeah.
With the recipes. So. Yeah. Super. Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Happy. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you
Harriet,
for including me.
I know. Thank you so much. This is fantastic, and I'm delighted to have heard your story as well. So thanks for being with me today.
Thanks.
Yeah. Harriet is so sweet. What she's created for herself reminds me of Ella Morton, whom I interviewed in episode 4. And not to take anything away from Ella, but I love that Harriet has built this independent lifestyle for herself where she can pick and choose her projects and pitch ideas based on what she loves, like the Book of Old Food. You can find out more about Harriet with links to her website and other outlets where she writes at wanderlustandlipstick.com/podcast. You can find out more about me by visiting Wanderlust and Lipstick, as well as Wander Tours, where you'll see the tours that I lead around the world. I encourage you to also check out the Wander World Foundation, the nonprofit I founded to help women and children in developing countries. I'll put links to all those sites in the show notes as well. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a free download on how to get more out of your travels. You can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, and write a review. This really helps the podcast get more exposure. Ultimately, it's my desire to grow our Be Bold community, and this is one way you can help out. Please also share this podcast with friends and on social media. Don't forget to use the hashtag BeBold. If you know of any high-performing, adventurous, philanthropic women whom you think might be a good guest, shoot me a note or leave a comment. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. That's where you'll find our community. It's where we share goals, talk about our setbacks, and where you can find words of encouragement and inspiration from others. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.